All right, it's another episode of Forward Thinking Leaders. We are your hosts today. We're in the house with Mikey Mike.
What's up, everybody?
What's going on? I am Mike, as you know, and here we have with us for the first time, Stacy.
Yay! I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, man, we love it. We actually talked about doing this months ago.
Was it like a year ago?
Okay, maybe a year ago. I don't know.
Seems like quite a long time. Yeah.
All right, so that's my fault. I got a little overwhelmed with life and kids and work, and but we're back.
Yes.
And so
Super excited to be back, by the way.
yeah, the good things are worth waiting for, right?
Absolutely.
So we usually start, Stacy, by when it's your first time on the podcast, to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a mom of a beautiful little daughter who's about to turn 2.
Nice.
And she was 2 pounds when she was born. She was 3 months early.
Wow.
And she's the coolest thing ever. I am the worship leader at The Loft. I'm married to TJ Birch, who is like jack of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
He would jokingly add master of none, but I think he is incredibly talented. And my parents are pastors, and I just, moved back to St. Louis in 2015, and I'm just loving it here. And I'm really excited to be here with you guys and talk about today's topic.
2015, so where'd you live before that?
Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Out in Denver, Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I about passed out there in the elevation. It's real.
Oh, yeah, it's rough. They say like 30 days, if you move there, you have to wait to resume any normal like workout activities, even if you're healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
it's
real.
Pretty intense.
Yeah, that's a story for a different time, but yeah, that's real. Awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you today. Our episode today, of course, we do 4 words all the time. So our episode today is He is Our Sustainer, which is actually Stacy's input, because when we first talked about doing this is what was on her heart. So if you want to kick it off for the topic, what that means to you or
Absolutely. I mean, you don't need to ask me twice to talk. I think I was just in a place last year where I was really seeking God, and I'm always seeking God, but in this particular time, I was like, we had this new baby, and I felt a little overwhelmed because I'd never been a mom before. It was all new. And I was like, man, God, the world is so crazy. You've given me this daughter at this moment and this time and this day, and there's a purpose behind that. And I felt like God was saying, this is the first time you've come to me in this last year, really, about this. And I know you've been feeling this for longer than this moment. So did you forget that I'm your sustainer? And I was like, I 100% did. And so it inspired me to start looking up, what does it mean to be a sustainer? And so I did. I got online, I Googled it, and it means someone who upholds or maintains, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's a booster, a champion, a friend, a protagonist, a supporter, and it's a person who backs you. And if you use it in like business terms, it would be the maintenance of forward momentum in an organization, but it also puts the position of the organization, it sets it up for the long haul.
Okay.
So it starts it maintains it, and it pushes it forward. It propels it forward.
So it's forward thinking as well.
Absolutely. So it's like we all talk about the beginning of time and how God created heavens and the earth, and he saw us. And if, the questions that people that don't really know God or have questions about God are like, if he knew we were going to sin, why would he make us anyways? And it's like, well, the relationship. I mean, he wanted the relationship. He wanted the time with us. And so we look around in the world today, and it's like, it's not getting better, but let me ask you the idea. Have you ever heard of the concept of the open heaven? Okay.
No.
So open heaven. So when Jesus came and died on the cross for us and for our redemption, in that moment, he opened heaven to us. And so we are open to receive the Holy Spirit and receive his glory. And then we demonstrate that. And then we have an open connection. He tore the veil. I know you would mention that too. And I was like, that's in my notes.
Yep.
And there are so many scriptures, especially in the Psalms with David talking about God being our sustainer. In 1 Kings, talking about sustaining us, holding us up with his hand, maintaining us. It's all through the Bible. It's a theme through the Bible that he's our sustenance. He makes a way where there doesn't seem to be a way. He puts manna on the ground in the desert. He brings a raven to bring you meat. He puts you by still waters, and he is always providing for us. So if we've survived 100% of the time, why do we look at circumstances ever? Because he always has sustained us the whole time we've been working together with other people, by ourselves. We always come through the other side. He always makes a way. So it's like, deep, it was like this peace came over me, and I had this real revelation of the peace of God that passes like mortal understanding, and what it really means to like lay down your life, trusting God with it. It's not as hard as people make it seem.
Right. And, it's funny because I think about the Israelites in the Old Testament, and they kind of get a bad rep sometimes because we read the scripture and we're like, oh, you keep forgetting what God has done. You keep forgetting what God has done, right? And we're like, man, that's terrible. If I was alive, well, I think you're right. I think that we do the same thing.
100%.
I am alive, and guess what? It's the same for me.
Yeah. It happens. And I had one time talking about how he sustains. When we were in the Philippines, we had been there for like 7 years. And we had just taken Eliana into our home to be adopted, but she wasn't adopted yet. And we had this annual donation that basically kept us there every year. I mean, it was our biggest donation. It's what we used to stay there. And one year, it was like January 6th, and it didn't come in. And it should have been there by then. And that's the only time I've ever had an anxiety attack where it felt like a heart attack. It felt like in my chest. And I fell to the ground. I was sitting there. We just brought in this girl into our home. We didn't even know, but we were pregnant with Isaac then at that time too. Yeah, I didn't know that then. And I remember sitting there for a while, I'd say 30 minutes, just like, this is it. And then the Spirit of God just visited me and just put me to peace and said, you're going to be fine. We're going to make it. And that was it. And I said, okay. And, we ended up being there for 14 years overall. And I was talking to my mom because she ran our finances at the time. It's like, how do we make it through that year? Neither of us really knew, to be honest, right? We didn't really know how we made it through the year because it was like, without that donation, that was what we banked on. But slowly but surely, these smaller donations came in from so many different people, and it sustained us. Yeah. And from that point, I really learned to trust him. And then we moved back to the States, and it was like ground zero. And it was like I still knew he would provide, but I was like,
didn't we learn this lesson already, Lord?
Right. But then I think, well, when am I going to be punished? Which is a silly thing, but when you go through the flesh and stuff, it's like, am I going to be punished for being here or doing this? He's going to show up in the same way. And so, yeah, I mean, it's easy to read about the Old Testament and think, well, they really blew it time and time again. But, me too.
Oh, man, it's so relatable. I love to look back at those stories, too, and just be like, okay, remind myself. And then I think of Job, and it's like, man, of course Job loved God because he was so blessed. And then everything was taken away from him. And he still was like, man, Lord, I just need you, Lord.
Yeah. What about you?
You all know, if you've listened in the past, I've got a daughter that was struggling with addiction. And that's exhausting as a parent, and you have your kids out there doing the things that they're doing, and you don't know if you're going to get that phone call that says, hey, we found your daughter dead on the side of the road or whatever it may be. And it's very taxing on myself or the family or whatever. And God just had always come alongside of me in my darkest moments and just picked me up and said, you know what, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. And she is a week from today, she'll be 4 months clean.
Wow.
That's very cool.
That's amazing.
He's walked through this with me, and I, again, a lot of times it's in retrospect. You can look back and go, oh, he was here with me in this situation or at this point. But recently it's been very clear about how he's really just lifted up the family, me in particular, and just carried me along with this.
Yeah, but when you're going through it, it's hard. I mean, like you said, we look back, we're like, okay, we can see it. But I like one of the things that you said earlier, Stacy, about the definition of sustaining is it's also forward thinking. And that's what we tend to forget is that God is an awesome God, right? He's all powerful. He's omnipotent, omniscient, all the omnis, right? He knows, and he doesn't just do things for today. He's always putting building blocks in for tomorrow. And if we trust him, like we're supposed to, like you're saying, we will, then those building blocks will be there for the future. And when it's time, they'll come to fruition, right? And that's the sustaining. But if we don't listen, or if we give up hope or faith or whatever it is, then, maybe we don't allow for time for the promise to come to pass.
This is probably a silly thing to say, but one of the things that we talk about, like mom likes to talk about her sermons, before, or her teachings before, and like kind of here's like the overview. What do you think about that? And just kind of get feedback and get us talking. And then she steals all of our material. Love you, Mom. But she says it's fodder once it's out of our mouths in private.
Yeah, it's open
fodder.
game. Hey,
Yeah.
I got to preach too, so I'm not casting stones there. If you don't know, Mom is Pastor Lisa from the Loft Church. If you don't know,
Yeah,
go ahead.
absolutely. So she'll. I get like a ADD brain, and I am on meds for that, so it shouldn't be happening. But you might have to come back to me. I might have to circle back on that thought.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Oh, I know exactly where I was going. She will tell a story that's something that we've heard before, and I told her, I think maybe we still have current things that you're dealing with and that you deal with as an adult now, even this far in your journey with the Lord, that maybe you could share and just be a little more vulnerable. Because I remember growing up in church, and my pastor, who I love, and to this day, I think he spoke a lot of truth. He changed my parents' lives, really brought them into the Word, and taught them about worship and prayer and devotion and what it meant to spend that time with God. And I'll be always grateful for that. But I remember always he told the same stories from like years ago, and now they're multimillionaires and God's really blessed them, but that's where they came from. And I'm not knocking that at all. I think those are valuable stories, and I think new members need to know where you've come from. But it doesn't mean you're not struggling today. And I wonder if God sets it up that way too. It's like, if you're not relatable in this moment and everything is just peachy keen, nobody can relate to that because life is messy, you know? So it's almost like, now I don't think it's always to humble us. I think sometimes it is. And I definitely think it's always to teach us a lesson, but I think it's so we're relatable too. And it's the reminder that I'm your sustainer. I've got you. And because he's always going to get his glory,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
that's that open heaven thing. It's like we're representing the glory of God in real time on this earth. Everywhere. Do you guys know what laminin is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You
yeah.
do?
Yeah.
I know you would.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you guys
Across
know?
DNA.
I just found this out like recently.
Okay.
And I was like, my mind was blown away. So for the podcast, I'm gonna share like
Go ahead.
how I experienced it. Laminin is a protein binding. It's part of our DNA, and it binds the protein in our body. It keeps our tissue in place, and without it, you can have like deformed muscles. You can have kidney issues. I mean, it's pretty bad. I think you can even die when the.
Yeah, it's important.
It's
Laminin
very
is
important,
Yeah.
and it's shaped like a cross.
Yeah.
And I'm like, not only does God sustain us in this life, but he literally sustains us.
He holds us together.
He holds us together.
Yeah. And to your point, when our problems are to the size that I can fix them, then I get the glory,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But when our lives and problems and the things we all go through are to the size that only God can fix them,
Man, yes.
then he gets the glory.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
In 2 Kings 4, we read the story about the widow, and this is what I was thinking of coming into it, because there's something that we miss sometimes. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's in 2 Kings 4 if our listeners want to go and read it. But there's a widow who owes money, and her husband's dead, and she comes to Elisha asking for help because they're going to take her sons. And he says, go get all the jars that you can, empty jars. And he says, be careful not to get too few. Like, get enough. That's what he says. Yeah. And so they go in and they start with this one jar of oil. They fill all these canisters full of oil. It's like God sustained them. But it's interesting when there's a point when she said, hand me another jar. And her son said, we're out. And as soon as they ran out of the jars, the oil stopped. And I thought about it, and I thought, there's not only the lesson of him providing, which was more than enough to pay the bills and then to live on, but what if they had gotten more jars? He would have given more. And because he even said not to get too few, and I guess they didn't because they were okay, but just even putting God in a box sometimes that, okay, like me, I know you'll show up, but that $10,000 is what we live on, right? And putting in the box, can you just replace that? When maybe he's saying, I wanted to give you 10 times that if you were the faithful steward, right? And actually, to that credit, he did over the years, That's
so cool.
And so, in believing he's going to sustain us, beyond that, I think we have to have God-sized dreams.
Totally. I totally agree with that.
Is there any other thoughts you want to have before we?
Let me check my notes. I mean, I did put down there. There's an author who actually started, him and his wife co-founded International Glory Ministries. Are you familiar with them at all? Okay. Well, they've done a lot of really cool stuff. And he's authored a lot of books. And he has devotions that they do on plans in the U version.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bible app.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so he has 5 tips for an open heaven and maintaining that in your life. And it's having the right motivation, prayer, obviously, devotion to God, a purity of heart, and a passion for God's kingdom. And I just thought that's an excellent way to be seeking God's face and knowing that he is sustaining us and having, I think that's the best thing to do. And if you're looking for something to happen, why put a box around it? Why make it smaller in your human mind? Why not let God really run with it?
Yeah, because he will,
And
right?
see how far the sustenance goes, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
The thing I like about those 5 things too, though, is that it's about balance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not always about just making sure you check the boxes. But if you're super strong in one, but you really neglect the 4, what are we doing, right? And I think that's kind of what life is for me, is about trying to learn the balance in incorporating the devotion life and the prayer, but also the outreach and the evangelism and discipleship. And it's easier
And it
said
changes
than done.
too. It changes too because there are seasons in your life where it's like you're so thirsty. It's like I cannot get enough worship. I cannot get enough prayer time. I feel like I'm giving out maybe even more than I'm taking in.
Yeah.
And it's like, so God's saying, okay, let's pull back on some things.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I love it.
Mike, any closing thoughts from you?
No, actually, I think you guys covered everything pretty well on this one.
All right. Well, we're going to record a few more podcasts, so you're going to be on some other episodes as well. But that's it for He is Our Sustainer. We thank you, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks
and
for
we'll
having
see
me.
everyone next time.